"You need to pay off the debt of your father, son." My father's childhood friend stormed into my workplace. "If you can't pay for that, you marry my daughter. I am going to stay right here until you agree to date with her." Getting back the money he lent is not his real purpose. His real intention is to get me married to his daughter, my dad's childhood friend's girl. But why is he so persistent in pushing a date with his daughter? I was getting more curious about the hidden reason behind his action. My name is Aiden Bradford. I am 28 years old and I work at a factory. My dad started a small factory when he was my age, and together with my mom, they've been running it ever since. In the neighborhood, there is a man named Bob Miller, who is a childhood friend of my dad's, running a factory in the same industry. Bob also started his factory around the same time as my dad and still continues to manage it with his wife, just like my father does. Our family and Bob's family are close, sharing resources and manpower when one business falls short. Bob's daughter, Emily, is the same age as me. We've been childhood friends, attending the same school since kindergarten to junior high school. I have been harboring feelings for Emily since kindergarten. Emily and I were each other's first loves during our kindergarten years. I used to cry my eyes out from the loneliness of having to part from Emily after school, much to the dismay of my teachers and my mom. In our neighborhood park, Emily and I promised to get married in the future and even play pretend weddings. Even after entering elementary school, my relationship with Emily didn't change, and we would play together and do homework after school every day. I want to live together when we grow up, and on our days off we can play and go out just like we do now. What kind of house do you want to live in? I want a house with a big backyard. We would talk about our future almost every day. I expected our happy days to continue even when we grow older. Even now, I vividly remember the pure, youthful love I had with Emily, filled with such hopes and dreams. However, my days with Emily got interrupted when I entered junior high school. The distance between us started to grow wider due to an intruder. It was when I was in the 6th grade. Both my dad and Bob were achieving good results in their businesses, but their friendship began to sprout rivalry. I've hired 7 fresh graduates from a technical school this year. My business has been doing well recently, so I've increased the manpower. What a relief. Hearing this, my dad counted. Even if you increase the manpower, it's just more personnel costs. I can increase profits more efficiently at a lower cost. He then introduced the latest machinery. The machine my dad introduced was initially cost-effective and capable of precise, high-speed operations. However, it required frequent maintenance, and if not properly maintained, it would easily malfunction. My dad couldn't handle the difficult machine properly, and after introducing the new machine, he ended up losing a lot of money due to immediate repairs. Bob lent my dad some money and introduced him to a familiar mechanic. "I'm sorry for causing trouble for you two because of me," my dad apologized to us. My mom replied, "Don't be sorry for us. We should be thanking Bob for helping us." In the spring of my first year of junior high school, the 3 of us, my dad, my mom, and I, visited Bob's house. If Bob hadn't helped me, I would have had to close the factory. I can't thank you enough. It may take some time, but I promise to repay the money. Following my dad, my mom and I also bowed our heads to Bob. Then Bob laughed. "We're childhood friends, aren't we? It makes me feel uncomfortable when you're so formal and thanking me like that." However, my father responded firmly, "No, even if we're childhood friends, I cannot be discourteous." Seeing my dad like that, Bob looked as if he was pondering something and then said, "I'm not good with formal manners, but if that's going to make you worry, then how about you listen to one thing I say?" My dad responded eagerly, "Sure, I'll listen to anything." Without looking at my dad, Bob looked at me and said, If you marry my daughter, you don't have to repay your father's debt," and he smiled slightly. My dad, mom, and I were all astonished, but my dad said, "Marriage is something the two individuals should decide. Can't you suggest something that's within my power?" My mom also added, "Even if it takes time, we will definitely repay the money. Please let them decide who they marry on their own." However, Bob responded, "No, I'm satisfied if you just take my daughter as your wife. I won't ask anything else." He then forced us out of the house. It's true that we promised to get married when we were in kindergarten, and we talked about our future marriage in elementary school. But now that I'm in junior high school, I think differently. Marriage requires the consent of both parties. This forceful demand for an arranged marriage completely disregards the feelings of those involved. Even when we got home, both of my dad and mom were left speechless. Days later, Emily's mom, Harper, said to me, "My husband did what? It's probably just a joke. You don't need to worry about it, Aiden." That's what she told me. But on the Monday of the following week, my classmates were buzzing when I got to school. "Hey, you guys are engaged." My classmate, Logan, brought it up and the whole class got excited. On the whiteboard was a congratulatory message. "Congrats on your engagement," with me and Emily's names and our caricatures drawn out. I turned pale and lost my words. In place of my voicelessness, our teacher, who just entered the classroom, yelled out loud, "You guys, stop spreading nonsense," even going as far as to doodle on the whiteboard. "This will delay lesson." The teacher, angrily, quickly erased the whiteboard. Later, I was summoned by the teacher, and he told me a shocking truth. It was about that Emily's dad going around telling everyone in a PTA meeting that we were engaged. Then the teacher said, "You're in junior high school. Don't take the misguided words of an adult seriously. If your classmates say anything, don't hesitate to talk to me," and lightly patted my shoulder. I was shocked that my long-held feelings for Emily were known to my classmates and got teased about it. It seemed like Emily felt the same way. She started ignoring me completely in class. All I did was liking Emily. What did I do wrong? I felt intense anger towards Emily's dad. I couldn't focus on studying, and my test scores plummeted. Even if by coincidence Emily and I arrived at school around the same time, what a lovely couple, starting the day off hot and heavy. Logan and the others would tease us like so. Emily would glare at me and yell, "Don't follow me, stay away." Seeing this, Logan and others would comment, "Marital quarrel. They say fighting makes you closer, right? LOL," and they'd tease us again. I was hurt to be hated by Emily, whom I liked, and I started skipping school. But Dad would yell at me in the morning, "Go to school. Shut up. All this started because you bought that useless machine and got into debt." When I retorted, Dad would just quietly look sad. I didn't like seeing Dad's face like that either, and I started going to school again. But this kind of life continued only during my 7th grade. By the time I got to 8th grade, the rumors about us disappeared. Feeling guilty about talking back to my dad like that, I started to help him at his factory after school. While helping out, I began to immerse myself in the work at the factory. I decided that I wanted to work at Dad's factory after graduating from high school. But as soon as I told Dad about it, he got furious. "Working here as a helper and as a regular employee are not the same." I retorted, "I know that. I just want to contribute as an employee at your factory." But he responded back, "You are so naive to think like that." After the argument, Dad calmed down and said, "It's not that I don't want to hire you. The best way for you to gain professional experiences is to get a job at a different company." I was persuaded by Dad and decided to work at another factory. It's been 10 years since then. I'm now the same age as Dad was when he started the factory. For the past 10 years, I've thought about Emily every day, put my painful feelings into my work. Emily might not have any feelings for me anymore, but I'll become a capable man. Come to get to you, Emily. Until then, please don't choose any other man. With such hopes, I devoted myself to my work. One day, Dad had a heart attack and collapsed. By the time I rushed to the hospital, Dad had passed away. There was no time to mourn, and with the handling of many visitors, the busy funeral came to an end. As soon as I got home after everything was over, I was hit with intense sorrow and regret. I kept opposing Dad and only focused on my work after graduating from high school. I didn't do anything nice to him. As I was crying out these words, Mom said to me with a somewhat complicated expression, "That's not true." What do you mean it's not true? When I asked that to Mom, the doorbell rang. When Mom opened the door, there was Bob standing there. Bob said, "My condolences," and then stared at me and said, "With your dad's passing, it means that you, his son, will have to take over the debt repayments." I was taken aback by the sudden turn of events, and I retorted, "This is a lot to handle. Can you just spare us some time to mourn?" To Bob. Bob laughed a bit and said, "No worries, you don't need to pay anything. Just marry my daughter." After saying that, he left with a very satisfied look on his face, saying, "I'm expecting a good response." What was that all about? I mumbled, still in shock. My mother, seeing my confusion, explained, "In truth, before your father passed away, Bob would frequently come to the factory, always demanding either debt repayment or a marriage between our children. The stress dealing with him kept building up in your dad." She trailed off, tears streaming down her face. She handed me my father's diary, filled with detailed entries about Bob's visits, the discussions they had, and his worries that he didn't want to burden us with either of the deals. After my father's death, I began to understand the hardships he had been through. Every single day, Bob would show up at our house or my workplace, yelling, "If you can repay, at least have a meeting with my daughter. I can't handle this. I've been so anxious lately that I can't sleep well. He took my beloved father's life, and now he's coming for mine," I thought. Fear of Bob led me to agree to meet his daughter Emily again. I realized I hadn't spoken much to Emily since graduating elementary school. Plus, I worried she might still hold a grudge because of the trouble in junior high school. However, I was still in love with Emily. I was looking forward to seeing her. I was also filled with anxiety about the meeting. At the meeting, Emily said, "Hello, good to see you again," in a strangely distant manner. She must dislike me for real. I thought to myself, and I lost my words. As our parents chatted amongst themselves, the meeting continued in silence. "Well then, why don't you two talk things over?" At the words of Harper, the moment my mother and Emily's parents left the room, Emily's face, which had been dispirited until now, suddenly brightened up. "I'm sorry about my dad. He can be quite pushy. There's something I want to discuss with you." "Here's my number," she said, passing me a note with her phone number on it. As I was about to respond, Bob opened the door and walked in. "You two have always been close. There's no need to discuss anything now, so, what are you going to do?" he asked. It had only been a minute since we'd been alone. I felt a great sense of regret for the lost opportunity to talk with Emily. However, I now had Emily's contact information. I told Bob, "We'll decide what to do ourselves and report back to you later," and then I left the room. After the meeting, Emily and I talked on the phone almost every day. "I've always cared about you, Aiden, but in middle school, our classmates made fun of us, so I could only act cold towards you," she confessed. We were torn apart in junior high school because of Bob's meddling. However, our feelings for each other haven't changed. That would be the same no matter how many years, or even decades, passed. I've always thought of you too, Emily, but I've been worried that you hated me because of what happened back then. I said. I never hated you. I've thought about you every day. Emily replied, sobbing on the other end of the line. Same here. You were in my thought and prayers for the last 10 years. I admitted, tears welling up in my own eyes. As we confessed our feelings for each other after 10 years and my heart filled with feelings for Emily, a question suddenly came to mind. Why has Bob been so forceful about us getting together? The answer to my question came quickly in my conversations with Emily. Apparently, Bob had been eyeing my father's factory's state-of-the-art machinery. My father's factory had been in financial trouble and had debts, but it was equipped with all the machines Bob had ever wanted but couldn't afford. My father was a skilled craftsman but was not adept at machines. Bob would look at the unused machinery at my father's factory and would say, "What a waste. If it were me, I'd make full use of them," and had set his eyes on them for a while. His plan was to take me in as Emily's husband, make me work for free, and take over the factory and the machinery. Plus, he was aiming to receive my father's inheritance. All of Bob's scheming was documented in the materials Emily showed me. So, even with a little debt, if you get your hands on that machinery, you could make a profit many times over. I read a part of the materials out loud, stunned. In a voice filled with anger and sorrow, Emily told me, I believed in him, even though he's pushy sometimes, that he'd try to make things work with you and me for my sake. But since I was in high school, I began to suspect his persistent actions and started doing some research. Stunned and speechless, I listened as Emily continued. There's evidence of my dad's wrongdoings. I can't forgive him anymore. I'll expose him. Surprised by Emily's words, I asked, then will you let me help you? Emily and I went to a lawyer's office with the documents of the master plan created by Bob. I knew you were stubborn and twisted, but I didn't think it was this bad. I can't be with you anymore, Bob. Bob, informed about the divorce by his wife, stormed into my office. The sound of crashing vases and pottle echoed throughout the office, followed by the screams of the staff. Following Bob's arrest by the police for property damage, his factory workers reported to the labor board how Bob harassed them to work overtime, unauthorized. Losing his skilled craftsmen, Bob's factory went out of business in no time. Emily and I officially started dating and are now married. There was a time when things were so hard that I almost gave in to my parents' demands, but I'm glad I stuck to my beliefs, Emily said. The 10 long years of not being able to be together only strengthened our feelings for each other, I replied. After our marriage, we continued to share our thoughts and feelings with each other. After getting married, I quit my job at the factory and took over my father's. Emily started working as a secretary in my factory after our marriage. We support each other in our personal and professional lives. We respect each other as an individual, nurture our relationship, and lead a happy life. Her expression quickly changed from the guilty one she wore moments ago to one filled with anticipation as she turned to face me. I, too, couldn't wait any longer for the rare treat that was about to happen. I'm Steve. I'm a 32-year-old, single engineer. Ever since I graduated from a technical school with an electrical degree when I was 20, I have been working at my current electrical company. Every day, I commute between my workplace and home, living a monotonous life that never seems to change. I've never had a girlfriend, and I thought that this mundane routine would continue forever. But one day, I encountered an unexpected accident. Believe it or not, as I was leaving work, a car suddenly rushed into the crosswalk at a great speed, despite the pedestrian traffic light being green. Watch out! In a split second, I shielded an elderly man who was in front of me. which resulted in me colliding with the car. In that moment, sharp pain shot through my body. I couldn't bear it anymore, and I laid down on the road, writhing in pain. Luckily, the elderly man I had saved called an ambulance, and I was immediately rushed to the hospital. At the same time, a police car arrived at the scene, and the driver who hit me was taken in for police questioning. Once I was transported to the hospital's emergency department, I immediately received a doctor's examination. According to the doctor's diagnosis, I had a cracked rib due to the impact with the car, and to add insult to injury, I also had a severe sprain in my right leg. It made sense why I was in such pain, but neither of my injuries were life-threatening, and if all went well, I would be able to leave the hospital after about a month. Currently, only private rooms were available in the hospital, so I was set to spend my 1-month stay in the hospital in a private room. My mother from back home immediately rushed to the hospital, and when she found out I was not in a serious condition, she sighed in relief. "Steve, are you okay? I heard about the accident and I was worried sick. Sorry to worry you, Mom, but it seems like I'll be able to leave the hospital in about a month if all goes well. Soon, the attending physician during my hospital stay will come to my room, so I think we can get a more detailed explanation then." Immediately, I heard a knock at the door, so I said, "Come in," and welcomed the doctor in charge. But the moment the door swung open, I was so shocked that my mind went blank. To my surprise, the person standing before me was none other than my childhood friend, who I couldn't forget, Maggie. Seeing me and my mother, she too seemed to be taken aback. Her eyes widened in surprise. I saw your name and thought maybe it could be, but I never imagined that my patient would be you, Steve. Oh my! Never in my wildest dreams did I think I would bump into you here in the hospital. Who've grown into such a beauty, Maggie. I didn't recognize you at first." In stark contrast to me, who was left speechless from the surprise, my mother started chatting cheerfully. Usually, I get tired of my mother's incessant chattering, but this time, I felt truly grateful for her presence. Truth be told, Maggie and I didn't part on good terms, so I honestly didn't know how to face her or what to say. Maggie, perhaps soothed by my mother's brightness, started speaking in a relaxed manner. "Thank you. I've been working at this hospital ever since I graduated from college. I'm still nervous, but I promise to do my best." After that, Maggie gave us a thorough explanation about the details of my hospital stay. My mother, while nodding and saying, jotted down notes and thanked Maggie with a smile. "Thanks to you, Maggie, I've got a clear idea about what's to come. For now, I'm off to get everything we need for Steve's stay at the hospital. I know we might be a bother, but please take care of us, Maggie." With those words, my mother left the room, light on her feet. As my mother left, Maggie wore a nostalgic expression, as if reminiscing about the past. "Your mother, she hasn't changed a bit. Still as youthful as ever. I'm glad to see she's well." While responding to Maggie's words, I couldn't take my eyes off her. She had grown into a stunning woman. With her jet black wavy hair grown out to her shoulders, clad in her white lab coat, and wearing silver-rimmed glasses, Maggie exuded an intellectual aura. Back in our childhood, the lively and vivacious Maggie, now all grown up into a mature woman, made my heart flutter unexpectedly. Striving to conceal my racing heart, I managed to maintain a calm demeanor as I speak. "Thanks, but it's good to see that you're well, Maggie. When we were in middle school, you moved away all of a sudden. It was quite a shock to me and my family." "That's right." Without any notice, Maggie, who lived in our neighborhood during middle school, suddenly moved away. Being a childhood friend since our early years, her sudden moving left me deeply upset. In fact, she was my first love. Then, Maggie furrowed her eyebrows and revealed a surprising truth. "I'm sorry for surprising you back then. Actually, my mother ran off suddenly with a man who wasn't my father. I suppose your mother, Susan, might be aware of this. To avoid any further spread of rumors, my father and I decided it was best to move to his hometown. I've always regretted that I couldn't say a proper goodbye to you and your brother, Peter." "I see. That must have been tough." I sympathize with Maggie's turbulent past, while feeling a twinge of pain at the mention of my brother's name. An inevitable past shared by the two of us resurfaces, but it's something we can't discuss here. Regardless of the circumstances, we have been able to reunite, and I didn't want to ruin the positive atmosphere. Maggie seemed to feel the same, flashing a bright and cheerful smile in the next moment. But now, I've fulfilled my dream of becoming a doctor, and I'm enjoying every day of it. I'm still nervous, but I hope I can help you recover, Steve. That's right. I had always loved this radiant part of her. As I was reminded of this, I nodded and responded, "Thank you." And so, after reuniting with Maggie after 17 years, my stay in the hospital began. By the way, there's a certain backstory to the awkward past between Maggie and me. I have an older brother, Peter, who is 2 years my senior. Peter is an elite graduate from a top university and currently works for a multinational corporation, often traveling overseas. Given our close ages, Maggie, Peter, and I used to play together a lot when we were kids. As I advanced to middle school and entered puberty, I began to realize that I had feelings for Maggie. "Hey, Peter, and you too, Steve. I baked a cake with my aunt. Would you like to have some?" Maggie, who had been visiting our house frequently even after we entered middle school, came to our room that day with a plate of freshly baked cake. Peter and I, who were playing video games, were thrilled at the delicious-looking cake. "Wow, that's amazing. It's like you're a pro. Maggie, you're definitely going to make a great wife someday." "Hee hee. Thank you, Peter." My brother was right. Maggie's homemade cake was delicious. But I remember clearly, even now, while I was poking at the cake with my fork, watching the two of them with mixed feelings. You see, ever since we started middle school, the relationship between my brother Peter and Maggie had grown closer than ever before. Maggie often said she wanted Peter to help her study, and they frequently went to the library together. Honestly, I had a feeling that the whole studying thing was just an excuse for Maggie to spend time with Peter. It may be weird for me to say this as his little brother, but Peter was quite the heartthrob, a far cry from an average-looking guy like me. On top of that, my brother, Peter, was excelling in both academics and sports, always being the center of attention for the girls. I thought I was good at studying too, but all things considered, there was not a single aspect where I could beat Peter. Feeling proud of my brother, while simultaneously harboring an inferiority complex towards him, in a way, should make sense. Perhaps even Maggie has feelings for Peter. This suspicion crept into my mind, and one day, I boldly broached the topic with my brother. "Peter, you seem to be going to the library with Maggie quite often recently. What do you guys talk about?" Peter thought for a moment before answering. "Well, Maggie seems to have a crush on someone, and I'm just giving her some advice. Of course, I'm also helping her with her studies." Upon hearing those words, I was shocked. Regardless of whether the person she likes is Peter or not, it's clear that Maggie does have feelings for someone. Despite her never acting like having feelings for someone in front of me, the fact that she relies on my brother for advice may imply that, to her, I don't matter. Just as girls flock to me only to get closer to Steve, I guess to Maggie, I'm nothing more than an added bonus. We've been hanging out since childhood, but perhaps it's time for me to stop having unrealistic expectations and involvement with her. From that day on, even when Maggie visited our house, I made it a point to avoid her thoroughly. My change in attitude was probably too overt. Both Maggie and Peter seemed to sense the strange shift in me. But it's harder to stay close to her knowing that my feelings for her will never be reciprocated. I started to just stay in my room more, saying, I want to focus on my studies. Back then, the only outlet I had was trying to get good grades in tests. However, no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't surpass Peter. Thinking about that made me feel even more empty. In retrospect, I think my mindset was too extreme, and I really regretted continuing to avoid Maggie until we had to part ways abruptly. Being a family with Peter, we were naturally able to return to our previous close relationship. But honestly, I felt that Maggie had every right to dislike me. But she was so warm and welcoming towards me, even after I had abruptly distanced myself. Once again, I felt grateful for Maggie's magnanimity, and I decided to cherish our relationship. Although it was just a month-long hospital stay, I firmly vowed to spend it peacefully and without incident. Thanks to Maggie's appropriate treatments, my recovery after the hospitalization went smoothly. I was full of anxiety at the time of the accident, but at this rate, I should be able to return to work without any problems. My mother, who visited me in the hospital, expressed deep gratitude for Maggie's dedicated work. I didn't know what to do because my family member had never been hospitalized before. But Maggie, you really saved us. Oh, I have a present for you. With that, my mom handed Maggie a handmade bead hair tie with a smile. My mom is a handmade crafts artist and has often given her works as gifts. Every time Maggie receives them, she politely says, "Thank you," which seemed to motivate my mom even more. Believe it or not, my mom even brought a cake that day. Mom, this isn't okay. You can't bring homemade food into the hospital. But my mom, as always, was unfazed. But just a little bit is fine, right? During a break, why don't you and Maggie have a piece? Maggie looked a bit troubled, but accepted the cake, saying, "Well, since you've gone through the trouble, just this once." After my mom left, I apologized to Maggie several times. "Maggie, I'm really sorry. Whether it's the cake or the accessories, it seems like she's making you feel uncomfortable. You don't have to worry about my mom. If it's a hassle, please decline. It's okay." But Maggie, with a wide grin, shook her head. "No, it's not a hassle at all. In fact, I really appreciate your mom's kindness. See, my mom never really cared about our home, so I never got to experience things like making sweets together. But your mom, she's taking care of me as if I were her own daughter for a long time, right? She's the reason why I was able to stay out of trouble during my rebellious phase. I'm really happy to receive these lovely gifts." Maggie's words resonated strongly with me. Maggie had experienced the painful past of being betrayed by her mother, but if my mom could provide even a little support, I couldn't be more grateful. My mom might seem carefree, but she's genuinely worried about Maggie. I now realize how kind my mom really is. However, it might not look good if we keep eating cake in the hospital. With that, Maggie looked around and closed the curtain around the bed. Now, with the curtains closed, we should be fine. Shall we dig into the cake? With that, Maggie, who had been looking a bit guilty earlier, turned towards me with an expression full of anticipation. Facing the rare treat, I couldn't wait any longer. Wow, this is amazing. The fact that I hadn't tasted my mom's cake in a while made it taste even more delicious. Perhaps having Maggie around also enhanced the taste in a way. It truly is so delicious. It's as good as back then. I never imagined that after such a heartbreaking parting, I never expected eating cake with Maggie. As I relished in this happiness, I also felt that with my imminent discharge from the hospital, I should keep my feelings for her under wraps. Having seen Maggie again, I was strongly reminded of how much I liked her, but it's unrealistic to think that a woman as charming as her could fall for a guy like me. If that's the case, it's best to keep it as a beautiful memory. As I was getting ready for leaving the hospital, my brother, Peter, came to visit the day before of the discharge. Apparently, he was coming back to the US temporarily and wanted to check on me. When I heard this, I immediately told Maggie that my brother would be coming to visit. Peter must have been just as shocked by the sudden parting as I was. If they had such a close relationship back then, he would surely want to see her. It's funny, back then I was so jealous of their relationship, but now I even think that a man like my brother is more suited for Maggie. After all these years, I guess I've grown up too. Because I love her, I now believe that her happiness is the most important thing. During the reunion with my brother, Peter was as handsome as ever, and, despite the long time apart, he seemed to be enjoying talking with Maggie. "Maggie, long time no see. You've grown up so much, I'm surprised." "Peter, it's good to see her doing well." Looking at the two good-looking people, I thought they'd indeed make a great couple. At this point, it's embarrassing to recall how I harbored feelings of animosity towards my brother. But then, he said something unexpected. "Remember, before Maggie moved, there was a period where you and Maggie drifted apart, right? At that time, I was really worried about what to do. You wouldn't talk to me and Maggie was panicking. Maggie and I had never touched on the subject before, so I never expected my brother to bring it up so casually. While Maggie and I were taken aback by his comment, my brother suddenly stood up. "That's right. I have something to do after this. See you tomorrow, Steve. I'll come to pick you up with Mom." Leaving us in an awkward atmosphere, my brother fled the hospital room. Tomorrow is the day I'm being discharged. Should I apologize about it now? Before I realized it, I found myself speaking to Maggie reflexively. "Maggie, I'm really sorry about that time. The truth is, I've always had feelings for you, but I thought that you were into my brother, and that made me behave in such a way. Looking back, it was immature. I'm really sorry." I felt like I was burning with embarrassment, but as soon as I confessed my feelings, the weight on my chest seemed to lift. I was prepared for a crushing rejection, but Maggie's reply was unbelievable. "No way. I'm so happy. Actually, I've always had feelings for you, Steve. I was having those study sessions so frequently because I wanted to talk to Peter about it, but I never thought I made such a misunderstanding. Oh, it feels like I took a huge detour." Maggie looked relieved, and I had the urge to hug her on the spot. But considering that we were in the hospital, I restrained myself to just holding her hand gently. "It's all right. Even if we took the long way, we eventually reached our destination, right?" When I said that, Maggie blushed and gave me the most wonderful smile, saying, "That's true too." In this way, I was able to start dating Maggie officially as soon as I was discharged from the hospital. According to my brother, he too regretted the past. "Maggie asked me to keep her feelings for you a secret, and you were suspicious of our relationship. So I was worried about how to respond. Things got complicated, but in the end, it's really good that you two got together. Really. I thought Maggie, a beautiful woman, would be a better match with my successful brother." With that, my brother placed his hand on my head as if to ruffle my hair, and said, "What are you talking about? You're my pride and joy, little brother. Have some confidence in yourself." At those words, I felt a sense of vindication for all the feelings of inferiority I'd been harboring. "Thanks, big bro. Now, truly confident, I want to stride forward in life, shoulder to shoulder with Maggie." Watching us brothers, our mother had a proud look on her face. "Now that you and Maggie are together, I can't wait to see my grandkids." "Mom, you're really jumping the gun." While laughing with my brother, I felt truly blessed to be a part of this family. In the summer of my 8th grade year, as a member of the swim team, I was passing by the girls' locker room when a gust of wind blew the door wide open. Inside, my childhood friend Alice, who was tall and beautiful, was changing her clothes. I could see parts of her I wasn't supposed to, and when our eyes met, she said, "Can you hurry up, please?" "But Alice, are you really okay with this?" In response to my confusion, she casually replied, "What's the big deal now? It's not like I'm losing anything." Being in the presence of Alice, who showed no embarrassment, made me swallow hard. My name is Mike Thompson. I'm 28 years old, and I just got married to my wife, Alice. Alice was my classmate from elementary through high school, and my childhood friend. When I first met her, I thought she was a unique girl. In the winter of our first grade year, she transferred from another school and soon became friends with a girl named Jennifer. But whenever a boy tried to talk to her, she would lower her gaze and stay silent. At times, she would even start crying just from being approached by a boy, confusing her teacher and classmates. I watched her from a distance, observing her in secret. Upon getting married, I started reminiscing about how Alice and I met and became close. When she got transferred in the first grade, she was a mysterious girl who I couldn't quite understand. When a boy told her, "You dropped your eraser," she would awkwardly look down and freeze. When a boy from the neighboring desk asked, "Can I see your textbook?" I forgot mine. She would panic and start sobbing. However, when she was with a group of girls, she seemed to be having fun, drawing pictures and chatting excitedly. I found myself curious about her and watched her from a distance. Our relationship took a turn in the spring of 3rd grade. We were in the same class again and started talking through our mutual friend Jennifer. "Mike, Alice is uncomfortable around boys, so you should be nice to her," said Jennifer, a friend since kindergarten, and that's how I started spending more time with Alice. During recess, Alice would say, "Mike, you're the tagger," and we'd play tag in the hallway. Teachers used to scold at us saying, "Do not run in the hallway," and we would get all pouty. Even though she still didn't talk to other boys and lowered her gaze when they approached, she was normal around me. "Why is it that you go silent when other boys talk to you, but you're normal with me and even play with me?" When I asked her this out of pure curiosity, she shared something with me. "Actually, my brother bullies me. My mom treats me like a princess, and my brother gets jealous and breaks my toys. That's why I'm a little scared of boys. But you are normal with me, aren't you?" I replied, to which she gave a sweet smile and said, "That's because you're tall like my dad, and you remind me of my teddy bear. I don't find you scary at all." I was taken aback by her response. "Dad, the teddy bear, is that how you see me?" In response to my surprise, she cheerfully replied, "Yes." She was usually very wary of boys, but there was something cute about her that was missing. From that day on, I became more interested in her. I wanted to see more of that adorable smile she only showed me. Before I knew it, I found myself drawn to her, always keeping an eye on her. And that's how I fell in love with her. I remember seeing her mother at school one day. Though I can't remember if it was a parent-teacher conference or a PTA meeting. "Your hair's come undone. Come here, I'll fix it for you." She's an incredibly kind mother to her daughter. But to the brother standing next to her, she's fierce, yelling, "Hey, don't you dare bully your friends." I saw this and had a slight understanding of why her brother was sulking. I hate if my mother is so scary and only kind to my sister. Maybe it's a good thing I'm an only child. I thought this just from observing her mother. Her brother, getting scolded by their mother, would pull on Jennifer's and his sister's hair. Sometimes, he'd insult her with "you're ugly," making her cry and receiving a punch from his mother. I've seen this scene more than once. Meanwhile, I was a junior high student, secretly nursing a crush on her. She's increasingly uneasy around male students and clearly shows her discomfort when spoken to, dodging them. Even our male homeroom teacher, she dislikes, saying to Jennifer, "I just can't stand that teacher's muscle brain mindset." Around this time, I started to feel a bit of a wall even when I tried to talk to her. It's much better than her attitude towards other boys, but it hurts me when she's cold to me, the one who's been nursing feelings for her. During this time, Jennifer shared some news with me. Alice's brother seems to have become a shut-in and stopped going to school. Apparently, he's staying at his grandmother's house because he's always fighting with Alice. So, Alice is living with just her mom and dad now. When I asked this, Jennifer responded, "Seems like it." Her brother had been forced by his mother to prioritize his sister since he was a kid, and it appears it affected his mental health. "No matter what I do, Mom won't praise me, so I might as well stay home and do nothing." He'd say things like that and spend all day engrossed in video games. She used to vent her frustrations on her when their mother yelled at him to stop being selfish and go to school. Eventually, after a family discussion, they decided to send him to live with his grandparents. Her father keeps his distance from the family, hoping his son will calm down. Even though she was distant, I happened to join the same swim club as her. Even in club activities, she avoided me. We used to get along so well when we were in elementary school. I was sad, but we were in puberty. She must have her own adolescent troubles, and that's probably why she's avoiding me. That's how I rationalized it. But deep down, I still wanted to be friends with her like we were in elementary school. Every day was depressing as she avoided me. But during the summer vacation of our 8th grade, an incident that would change the situation occurred in our club. "I'm sorry, I feel unwell and my stomach hurts. Can I take a break?" Suddenly she complained of feeling ill, slumping down on a bench by the poolside. Her complexion was getting worse, and the coach advised, "You should leave early and go to the hospital." "Okay," she nodded slightly in response and wobbled off to the changing room. I couldn't help worrying about her, and after a while, told the coach, "I'm worried about Alice. May I go check on her?" Even if I checked on her, I couldn't do anything to cure her illness. Still, I wanted to see her off, so I went in front of the girls' changing room. It was a hot day with occasional gusty winds, and when I was out by the pool, it was hot enough to dry my swimsuit in one go. It had been 10 minutes since she went into the changing room. She should have changed by now. Perhaps she had already left. While thinking about these things and passing by the girls' changing room, the door seemed to be slightly open and the wind blew it wide open, and I made eye contact with her inside. I saw her big things and instinctively covered my face with my hands. Apparently, she didn't close the door properly, and the wind blew it open. While she was changing, she noticed me and said with a calm expression, "Hey, can you hurry up?" Covering my face with my hands, I asked back, "Huh?" The sight of her that I had inadvertently seen earlier was replaying in my mind like a flashback. Caught off guard by what she said so confidently, my thoughts couldn't catch up, and I unintentionally let out a weak voice. "Hey, close it now," she said. She was telling me to close the door of the changing room. "Buddy, are you really okay with this?" "With what? Don't you have any thoughts about what I just saw?" I asked, to which she replied nonchalantly. "What's the big deal now? It's not like anything has been lost." In response to my childhood friend, who showed no signs of embarrassment, I gulped and closed the door of the changing room. She was so matter-of-fact, without shame or caution. Normally, a girl in such a situation would scream and hide. Where had she gone, the girl who usually avoids male students and male teachers? The discrepancy in her behavior had left me completely confused. She claims to be uncomfortable around men, yet shows no caution in such significant matters. Her carelessness made me worried and more absorbed in her. But now wasn't the time to be thinking about that. The next time I saw her, I decided I needed to remind her to close the changing room door when changing. I've loved her since we were kids, and I can't help but be concerned about her elusive and careless nature. Seeing her neglect important matters made me feel a strong desire to protect her even more. I went home feeling uneasy, unable to sleep that night because of her, and the images burned into my mind. Today's events were too stimulating for my adolescent self. The next day, I visited her house. "Well, if it isn't Mike, it's been a while. Please, make yourself at home," said her mother with a smile. "Long time no see. Thank you for having me." I greeted her and entered the house, wondering why Alice's mother, who was usually strict with her son, was always so kind to me. "What's up? Why the sudden visit?" Alice asked me with a slightly cold demeanor. "I have something important to discuss," I whispered. "Look, about yesterday, you should really keep the changing room door closed," I advised her, to which she responded with a puzzled look. "Why? It's just that the changing room smells moldy. I want to ventilate it, but there's no fan, so I have no choice but to keep the door open, right?" She was so natural and unguarded that I was puzzled with her what to say back to her. "For now, just bear with it while you're changing. You can leave it open when no one is using it," I suggested, but she still looked unconvinced. But I don't want to breathe in the mold, and I wasn't feeling well yesterday. Seeing her pout a little made her feel even more precious than usual. Your actions are so careless that it's hard for me to watch. Can I continue to look after you, not just as a friend, but as a boyfriend? Blushing, I confessed to her, to which she responded with a surprised look and asked, "What, you want to keep seeing my body in the future?" I gulped and replied, "No, that's not what I mean. I genuinely want to be your boyfriend." I know, you're so serious even when I'm just joking, but becoming a boyfriend is still a long way off. From now on, let's get along again as friends, she said with a cheerful laugh. When was the last time I saw Alice's smile? I quietly mumbled to myself. The girl who had been avoiding me until just the other day was nowhere to be seen. Since we restarted our friendship, she has started studying with me after school and playing games as if nothing had ever happened. But in school, perhaps she was embarrassed about being the subject of gossip among her friends. She continued to avoid me and the other male students. I had thought about asking her why she had been avoiding me all this time. But I felt that if I asked her something strange, it might strain our relationship, so I didn't ask her anything. When we were alone, she would show me a smile that she showed no one else. I was satisfied enough with that, and I thought it was fine not to touch on anything else. Later, I went to the same high school as her. In the spring of our freshman year in high school, I told her my feelings once again. "I've liked you, Alice, since elementary school. Will you be my girlfriend?" Contrary to me, whose face turned bright red with nervousness, she replied with a calm expression, "Sure." What, surprised, I looked up at her face, and she said with a bright smile, "I can talk to you, Mike, without feeling nervous at all. You remind me so much of my dad and my teddy bear. We were destined to be lovers, I guess." Seeing her laugh so carelessly, I was taken aback. "What do you mean by that?" I grumbled as she poked my cheek. "Daddy, please take care of me as your girlfriend from now on." "I'm not your dad. Don't call me dad," she said, scary, and ran away like a little child. I clearly remember chasing after her, who was running as if she were dancing, like cherry blossoms in the spring of our first year in high school. Even after we started dating, and even after we went to the same high school, she was still a little out of it. And that hasn't changed even now that we're married and adults. She would change her clothes anywhere in the house when I was with her, and she would leave her clothes and underwear scattered around. Occasionally, she teases me and pokes my cheek, laughing happily. And yet, she also has times when she grumbles about work. A female supervisor was transferred, and a new male supervisor took over. I'm still a little uncomfortable with men. I'm not sure why, but they're kind of scary. From my perspective, who usually watches her, I sometimes wonder who's saying that. If you're uncomfortable with men, are you okay with me? You're not scared to be with me, right? When I asked her, she said, "Not at all." I wonder why. I still find other men scary, but I'm not scared of you at all. It must be because you look just like my dad. When my wife says that, I feel a bit conflicted whether to be happy about it. This is something I found out after marrying her, but her mother wanted to raise her in a girly way, and her older brother in a boyish way. He was treated strictly from a young age because they wanted him to grow up to be a reliable eldest son. She was treated gently and carefully with love because they wanted her to grow up to be a cute and modest eldest daughter. However, this resulted in he becoming a shut-in and fights between the siblings. He is now living at his grandparents' house and working in agriculture at his own pace. He seems to have calmed down since he started living with his grandparents. Her father regrets that he drove my wife and Bial into this situation because he couldn't stand up to his strong-willed wife. Her father, who is kind-hearted and a bit timid, indeed has a similar physique to mine. You're just like my real son, he said, treating me kindly. When I see him, I also feel like he's my real father. You really do look like Dad, my wife says with a laugh. To her, I reply with a smile. It seems we were destined to be together. Even now that I'm married to her, I sometimes look back and find our meeting mysterious. From now on, we want to continue our fun married life as a couple. What did you think? Your subscription to our channel will motivate us to create more content. See you in the next video. My boss, Susan Anderson, is well known for her dedication and competence at work. When she has a drink, she transforms, becoming so lively that it's startling compared to her usual demeanor. However, when I ended up escorting an intoxicated Susan home, I stumbled upon a scene I never anticipated. My name is Jeff Carter. I'm 26. I'd been reassigned to a new department after working for a few years at this company, and I was having a hard time adapting to the unfamiliar tasks. Jeff, you've made a mistake here. Guiding me through my tasks was the notoriously stern Miss Susan Anderson. At 37, she has an age-defying beauty, which captivates all the newcomers. You've made this mistake twice now. Can you try not to make me repeat myself? I'm sorry. With her icy stare and sharp words, any glimmer of hope quickly faded away. But there are a few employees who find her harsh demeanor rather appealing. I, who have a burning desire to quickly adapt to my job, never viewed Susan as others did, as a member of the opposite sex. I lost my father at a young age, and my mother single-handedly raised me and my brother. I joined this Fortune 500 company, aspiring to repay my mom, even just a little. For this reason, I want to prove myself at work as soon as possible. Given this drive, I don't have the luxury to spare any special feelings towards my female co-workers. What's more exciting to me is the fact that Susan, one of the company's top-tier employees, has agreed to mentor me. This is my opportunity to learn and absorb all I can from her. Her strict training is challenging. It makes me want to run away sometimes, but I was brimming with determination. A few months had passed since my transfer to the new department. Just as I was beginning to adapt to my work, Susan and I were invited to a client dinner. Apparently, Susan can handle her liquor, and she becomes exceptionally lively when she drinks, always managing to enliven the atmosphere. The client seemed to enjoy Susan's company quite a bit. As her direct subordinate, I was also invited, and we were exchanging toasts over some exquisite meal. Let's drink more. Susan, I'll drink on your behalf. At the restaurant owner's announcement about a new spirit, we decided to try it, and Susan seemed to be getting tipsier than usual. She must have been exhausted from her constant grind at work. The client, fond of Susan, kept refilling her glass relentlessly. Pour me another. Energized, Susan was drinking at a faster pace. Although she appeared to be having fun, I didn't miss the moments when she looked worn out. Let me have that drink, please. Since I'm a seasoned drinker, I started taking the drinks intended for Susan. The client seemed to be comprised of heavy drinkers, and once they realized that I could hold my liquor, they enthusiastically began serving me. I felt like I was drowning in the endless rounds of toasts. Susan, incessantly chatting next to me, was a stark contrast to her usual stern self at the office. Work is my life. From personal hobbies to a passion for her work. She just couldn't stop talking. But it wasn't just about herself, she was also good at engaging others in the conversation and listening. She was an eloquent speaker and a good listener. This was the phrase that came to my mind watching her. The clients left expressing their satisfaction, as they usually do, after having a delightful evening. After watching them until they disappeared from sight, suddenly, she slumped over as if the tension had left her, saying, "Sorry, I can't anymore," and hung her head low to the ground. I ended up with the responsibility of getting a tipsy Susan safely home. "Susan, is this the right place?" "You got it, probably." "Wait, over there, I don't know." "Which one is it?" Since her apartment was within walking distance, I supported her staggering steps for about half an hour. Here. Welcome to my castle." She giggled, pointing to her new apartment building. We finally arrived. Opening the door and seeing Susan collapse in the entryway, I was worried she might just fall asleep there. "Susan, you'll catch a cold if you sleep here. Is it okay if I carry you to your room?" Worried about her leaving the door unlocked, I waited for her to nod before entering. "Excuse me." But the moment I entered the room, I couldn't believe my eyes. That's because clothes and books were strewn about the floor, and garbage was left on the table. "Oh, sorry, it's messy, right?" "I think so too." "Jeff, take a seat. Have some coffee or something." It's out of character for you. Seeing this side of her that nobody at work knows, I can't help but feel a sense of superiority. Suddenly, Susan began tidying up the room cheerfully. "Susan, I'm heading home soon, so don't mind me." With the thought of letting her rest as soon as possible and not wanting to impose, I turned to leave. However, seeing her staggering as she tried to tidy up, I decided to help clean up the floor and take out the trash, even if it was meddling. "You're good at this." "I'm not efficient at work, but I'm good at housework. I've always been good at household chores. I can cook, clean, do laundry, even so." While I still struggle to work independently without Susan's support at work, I never thought my skills would come in handy here. Maybe because she's drunk, Susan is tidying up, but for some reason, she's making more of a mess. Every time she moves a pile of clothes to the laundry, she bumps into something and drops it. She confessed that she's bad at sorting garbage and eventually gave up, leaving it in a scattered state. Nevertheless, she was determined to clean up. She's my boss at work, always handling tasks efficiently. Seeing her like this, different from her usual self, makes me feel the gap for the second time today. She's kind of cute. And I thought Susan was cute. Even though we have a 10-year age difference, it's not disrespectful to think she's cute, is it? While I was thinking about this, Susan went to the balcony to get the laundry. Due to her unsteady feet, she stumbled over the step and looked pretty dangerous. I watched her, feeling anxious, and found myself staring at her colorful underwear hanging there, feeling my face getting hot. "Don't look." Susan noticed that I had seen it and quickly hid it behind her back, her face turning red as well. The embarrassment seemed to sober her up a bit, and she started to talk less. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to look." As we both felt awkward, I was gathering the trash while looking for an opportunity to leave. "Susan, is this all the trash?" I asked if there was any other garbage, and there she was, asleep while folding laundry. I covered her with a blanket and left a note. I borrowed the key that had been left out, locked the front door, and placed it in the mailbox. The following day was Saturday. It was allowing me for a slightly late wake-up. Amidst a hangover, I was cleaning my room when I received a call. It was from Susan, expressing her gratitude for taking her home and apologizing for her embarrassing behavior. Recalling Susan's actions from the previous night, a smile crept up on my face. I responded, assuring her not to worry about it, and added that I had a chance to drink some alcohol, which I don't usually do, and was actually nursing a hangover. After that, there was no further contact. Sunday ended and Monday arrived. The hangover had subsided, and I was fresh and ready to go to work when I was summoned by Susan. Had I made some kind of mistake? I wondered. Reflecting on last week's work, I followed Susan to the break room. Jeff, you were in my apartment, right? Susan asked nervously. I felt a bit panicked, wondering if I shouldn't have entered into her room. As expected, Susan didn't remember that day. Unsure how to respond, I decided it was best not to lie and said, I'm sorry, I guess you didn't like me entering your house. I chose to apologize sincerely. Then Susan said, thank you. I can't remember much after the party started. I'm ashamed I got so drunk. Jeff, you took me home, didn't you? I had expected to be scolded, but instead, I was thanked. I responded that it was nothing, and then she said, so, you saw inside my apartment, right? I'm really sorry you saw my embarrassing side. She bowed and apologized profusely. Susan, please lift your head. You didn't trouble me in any way, and I honestly didn't mind. I urged her not to worry anymore, but when Susan looked up, her face was as red as her ears. You found out I'm bad at housekeeping, didn't you? Susan murmured awkwardly. And then, she began to talk about why she was bad at housekeeping. Susan had been working part-time since college to contribute to the medical bills of her sick mother. She and her father had been working to pay for living and medical expenses, while her sister helped with the housework. So, I've always been indifferent to housework, and even now, I can't shake that habit. Even though I can handle work, I'm terrible at housekeeping. Susan shared her life story, looking sad. I didn't understand why she was telling me this, but when she laughed and said that all her previous partners broke up with her because she couldn't do housework, I couldn't help but interrupt. What's wrong with not being able to do housework? It was a genuine question. Susan looked surprised, her eyes wide. I mean, everyone has strengths and weaknesses, right? The idea that women should naturally be good at housekeeping is outdated, I think. I stated that there's no point in being together if you can't complement each other's weaknesses, and Susan burst out laughing as if something had been lifted off her chest. Jeff, thank you. A beautiful smile and words of thanks. From that time, I began to notice Susan. Then one day, Susan fell ill and had to take the day off. We had an urgent project going on, and a colleague named Mark stepped in to help. Mark, 36, had recently married a younger woman and was boasting about it. While the rest of the staff were busy with their work, he kept talking about himself. You know, I actually dated Susan. My hand stopped for a moment at his words, and I forgot to breathe. But Susan, she acts like a competent woman at work, but she's utterly hopeless at housekeeping. After boasting about his marriage, Mark started bad-mouthing Susan. Honestly, I had no idea what he was trying to say. Don't you think it's inconceivable for a woman to be incapable of doing housework? When Mark burst into hearty laughter after saying this, everyone in the room felt a sense of repulsion. Susan always worked harder than anyone else, and she shamefully admitted to me that she wasn't very good at housework. When she admitted this and felt sorry, she made a sad smile. Because I knew this side of Susan, I could not accept Mark's remark, so I objected. What's wrong with a woman who can't do housework? Surprised and annoyed by my sudden opposition, Mark's face twisted. However, when the other employees also started voicing their objections, he had no choice but to retreat back to his department with a disgruntled look. After work, I decided to check on Susan. Susan, it's me, Jeff, I said, greeting her through the intercom. Susan, who looked wary, opened the door for me. Jeff, what's up? Did something go wrong at work? Assuming that I came to consult her about work, I told her that wasn't the case, and that I came to visit her. Apologizing for the mess, she let me in. Susan, can you eat anything? She had recovered from her fever but still felt quite drained. In response to my question, she just shook her head and took a seat on the couch. After I made her some simple rice soup in her kitchen, she happily accepted it. "Jeff, you'll make a good husband," she said with a gentle smile. In front of that gentle smile, I couldn't hide my feelings anymore. "I want to be your husband, Susan." In the heat of the moment, I confessed my love. Susan was naturally surprised and even dropped her cup. "What are you saying, Jeff? I'm over 10 years older than you, and I can't even do housework. There are plenty of younger, more domesticated girls out there. You should reconsider." Though Susan's voice sounded sad, I knew I couldn't back down now and voiced my feelings. "Age doesn't matter to me. As for housework, we can support each other. You've always supported me at work, so I'll support you at home." This confession, akin to a marriage proposal, left Susan looking baffled, but she still responded with a happy smile. "I'm really touched by your feelings, Jeff, but could we maybe start as friends? I can't even think about dating someone right now." I thought she might reject me. Perhaps she's subtly trying to reject me now. I felt confused by her "let's be friends" proposal. But I decided that staying positive was the best way to move forward. "Absolutely." Then I spent the rest of the visit talking about why I liked her. Susan listened with a bashful smile. After I left, she texted me a single word: "Thanks." It felt like I was experiencing the innocence of first love. On the way home, I found myself running as fast as I could. The next day, Susan safely returned to work. The project we'd been working on also proceeded smoothly to its conclusion, to everyone's relief. And then, I decided to take on a new challenge. It was a call for proposals for a new project within the company. Susan encouraged me to take part in this, even though I hadn't achieved anything noteworthy in my career yet. After my father died from an illness, my mother raised me and my brother on her own. I wanted to repay her kindness in some way. If my proposal was accepted, I felt I could do something meaningful. Under Susan's guidance, I worked hard on this. The new project I proposed focused on providing emotional care for people who were caring for sick family members. Given that our company had connections with healthcare institutions, I thought we could do something meaningful for them. The pain that the individual and their family go through is immeasurable. I've seen this pain firsthand. I still vividly remember my mom crying in secret when she found out about my dad's illness. Unfortunately, my dad passed away. Even though I couldn't save them, I wanted to be there for them, to support them. My new project proposal, with all these emotions, won the CEO's award. "Congratulations, Jeff," Susan said as she brought a cake to celebrate, her eyes filled with joy. "This is all thanks to you, Susan." "Thank you," I said, taking the cake, hiding my shyness. "What's this? Are you two an item?" Mark walked in, teasing us. Upon seeing Susan, Mark snorted in amusement and turned to me. "Stay away from Susan. She can't even do household chores. You'll be fed up soon." "I know, because I broke up with her for that," he said, laughing and insulting Susan. Susan was about to retaliate, but I stepped in between them. "I seriously like Susan. It doesn't feel good to have someone like you insulting her. Could you apologize?" Susan blushed at my straightforward words, and Mark, perhaps not expecting that I was really in love, looked surprised. "Susan is much older than you, Jeff. Aren't there plenty of better women than her out there?" Mark said, which dimmed Susan's mood again. "Age doesn't matter, and what's wrong with not being able to do household chores?" Unable to respond to my words, Mark glared and walked away without saying a word. "Susan has many wonderful qualities beyond her inability to do chores, Mark. You knew these qualities and that's why you liked her, right?" Perhaps my words hit home because Mark looked guilty for a moment as he looked at Susan and then left the room without a word. An awkward silence filled the room we were left in. It was as if I'd made a public confession. While I was trying to figure out what to say, Susan broke the silence. "Thank you for defending me, Jeff. I'm really happy. And your confession, it made me happy too," she said, thanking me over and over again. "I just did what was right," I replied. "I like you too, Jeff," she said, and smiled faintly. I couldn't help but cheer at the unexpected development. "I did it." Susan laughed at my reaction, and I laughed along with her. And that's how we officially started dating. A year later, Susan, who had come to my family home, put her hands together in front of my father's gravestone. After winning the CEO's award with my new project proposal, I got promoted, and to celebrate the promotion, I took my mom and brother on a trip. It was a place where there are full of memories with my parents. My mom remembered my dad and cried while smiling. My brother and I also cried remembering our father. The reason Susan came to my family home was to ask for my mother's approval for our marriage. My mom happily gave her blessing and asked Susan to take care of me. Susan also bowed her head and thanked her. One notable thing that happened afterward was that Mark, who had looked down on Susan, came to apologize. Apparently, after getting married and having a child, a cold atmosphere began to spread in his home because he did not help with the chores. And it was his wife's words, echoing the hurtful ones he'd once hurled at Susan, that made him reflect on the past. In retrospect, he remembered that despite her struggles, Susan was always committed to her household chores. On the other hand, Mark hadn't even tried. He realized this difference and felt remorse for treating Susan so poorly while she was trying so hard. Now, he shared in the household chores in an effort to improve his relationship with his wife. Similarly, Susan and I, living together, have divided our chores. I'm in charge of cleaning and taking out the trash. Susan handles the laundry, and we alternate cooking duties. We cover for each other's weaknesses and live happily together. In our home, as we prepare to get married, we are also expecting a new life in 6 months. Surely, our lives will become even more challenging, but we are confident that together, we can overcome any obstacle. Ethan, was at the lowest point in my life. At 26, I married my longtime girlfriend, Alice. Ever since, we've been there for each other. I absolutely loved Alice. She was my reason for living. It's a bit of an exaggeration to say she was my reason for living, but in essence, Alice was everything to me. Alice and I met in college, and we've been together ever since. But the way we met, it's a bit embarrassing. I was head over heels for her from the first sight and went all out, thinking she was the one. At first, Alice was taken aback, but her kindness and understanding only made me fall for her even harder. Eventually, I confessed that I wanted to marry her because she was Alice. Our relationship started quite passionately, but that was just the beginning. I believe Alice and I were doing well. But when I was about 30, Alice was diagnosed with cancer. By the time it was discovered, it had started to spread, and the doctors gave a terminal prognosis. I cried. I felt pathetic. Alice was the one suffering, not me. I tried not to cry in front of her, but she probably knew. She always acted cheerful in front of me, which was incredibly painful to watch. So I did everything I could to support her, to ensure that in the time she had left, she'd say she lived happily. We went on trips and she ate her favorite foods every day. Rather than suffering for a long time, she wanted to live her life her way. Because that was Alice's wish. We laughed a lot and had fun. Thanks to that, Alice lived longer than the doctors had predicted. Ethan is kind of lonely, right? That's why I want to keep some memories. By doing that, you can remember the good times, laugh, and not feel lonely, don't you think? Alice always thought of me and departed for heaven with a smile on her face. For me, it felt like the world was ending. I tried to act strong in front of Alice, but when I was alone, I was just lost. Before I realized it, my house was a mess, and all I did was either stay at home or commute to work. Nothing was fun, and I couldn't find a reason to laugh. Every day, I felt like everything in life was over. But then, a turning point came into my life. It was a month after Alice had passed away. When I checked the mailbox after work, there was a letter from Alice. I was shocked. I hurriedly opened the envelope, and there were words written in Alice's handwriting. This letter is something I asked my parents to send after I am gone. If you're reading this, it means I'm no longer by your side, knowing you without me around. Your room is probably a mess, and you're likely feeling down, aren't you? Thinking that, here's a surprise from me. A gift certificate for a stay at a spa resort. I secretly bought it. Use this to take a little break and refresh yourself. Oh, and you better use it. If you don't share a photo from the trip with me, I'll haunt you by her bedside. The letter held Alice's thoughts and feelings. Alice had been thinking about what would become of me after she was gone. That's why she prepared such a thing for me. Alice, touched by her kindness, tears welled up in my eyes. There's no way to thank or repay her now. The thought makes tears flow uncontrollably. Sniffling, I open another piece of letter. However, instead of a letter filled with words, in the center of the paper it read, "Being by your side made me so happy. Thank you for enriching my life, filling it with love. I love you so much, Ethan." The stationery was slightly crumpled, with visible tear stains. I couldn't help but cry. Crying and crying and crying. The one who should be thanking is me. Alice, thank you for loving me and being with me. I want to see you again. While being gently rocked by the bus's movement, I gazed at the lush mountainous landscape. Today, I took a day off to head to the trip Alice gifted me. Honestly, I wasn't too enthusiastic, but Alice was looking forward to the pictures. I was being carried by the bus, thinking of how much Alice loved nature. She was passionate about traveling, especially places rich in nature. Even after her terminal diagnosis, she whimsically said she wanted to forest bathe. I rarely went to places rich in nature like mountains or rivers. I might have gone on school trips, and that's about it. I once wondered, looking at trees, what's so fun about it? But after being with Alice and experiencing nature, I was touched by the earth's bounty and the beauty of nature. It's a view you can't find in the city. There's a sense of escapism, and before I knew it, I too began to appreciate nature. While much of the view from the bus is shades of brown and green, occasionally rivers and campsites come into view. Speaking of which, Alice and I went camping often. When she first suggested camping, gathering the gear and all was a bit of a hassle, but it was fun. Struggling to light a fire, overcooking the barbecue, getting overly excited over small things and laughing together. Watching the flowing forest landscape, tears unknowingly flowed. Every time I remember Alice, there's an overwhelming sadness that pierces my heart. It's unbearably painful. Silently, I wept. Please, let me cry. I'm not strong enough to recover so quickly. Excuse me, are you okay? I was just quietly shedding tears, but the woman sitting across the aisle from me reached out with concern. I'm sorry, I'm fine, really. As I tried to nod in acknowledgement, I found myself frozen in place. The woman before me was breathtakingly beautiful. The long-haired woman, noticing my stunned expression, tilted her head and asked, is there something on my face? Snapping back to reality and wiping my tears, I hastily replied, sorry, you just remind me of someone I know. It wasn't just her beauty that caught me off guard. She was undoubtedly gorgeous, but I was struck by a kind of hazy feeling, like we'd met somewhere before, but I couldn't remember where. Where was it? Darn, I can't remember. As I was deep in thought, the woman made a slightly disappointed face and chuckled. "Ah, figures, right?" She then mumbled something to herself, which I couldn't quite make out. Did I say something odd? Seeing her slightly forlorn profile, I instinctively tried to change the topic. "Thank you for talking to me. It helped me pull myself together." It seemed like she was traveling alone, and if I continued to dwell on Alice, I'd end up ruining the trip she had planned for me. Maybe that's why I attempted to start a conversation. She looked surprised but responded with a gentle smile. "I just thought it was a shame for such a handsome face to look so down. Are you traveling alone?" The woman introduced herself as Maya and mentioned she was staying at the same hotel for work. As I introduced myself and mentioned that this trip was a gift from my late wife, she responded, "She must have been a wonderful woman. It's only natural to grieve when someone like her is gone." I thought she was truly a kind-hearted person, one who could genuinely connect with others. "We still have some time before the bus arrives. Would you mind sharing some memories of your wife with me?" "Huh? Oh, I'm sorry. If it's too painful, you don't have to. It's just, I grew up in an institution and have always been single, so I've never really known the warmth of a family." Maya looked at me with a hint of envy, although she seemed just a bit younger than me. She had a certain youthful innocence about her. Her words made me wonder if she had grown up starved of affection. They were so deeply sad and heavy. "If you're okay hearing my stories, I've got plenty." With that, I began sharing the joyful memories I had with Alice. "You two must have been a very close couple. Thank you for sharing that with me." Maya replied with a warm smile. She listened to my story till the end, and it felt like, after a long time, I had shared my memories with someone, which made my heart feel lighter. Ever since Alice passed away, I've been keeping to myself and haven't really talked to many people. But precisely because of that, I couldn't quite recall where I had met Maya before, and it was bothering me. While talking, I hoped I would remember, but sadly, I couldn't. It felt like a fishbone stuck in my throat, and the discomfort must have shown on my face. Maya looked puzzled and asked, "Is everything all right? You seem to be deep in thought." I gave her a smile. I didn't think it was that obvious. "Well, I feel like I've met you somewhere before, but I just can't put my finger on it." "Oh, I get it. It's frustrating when you can't remember something." She laughed, then added, "Let me help you clear that up," handing me a piece of paper. Was this an admission ticket? Actually, that inn has a small studio in its annex. Come check it out, she said with a smile, and at that moment, the bus came to a stop. After getting off the bus, I headed to the inn and had a pretty good time on my vacation. Though I wasn't really in the mood, chatting with Maya did lighten my spirits, and the thought of having a story to share with Alice cheered me up a bit. And I was curious about the studio Maya mentioned. This place, although an inn, apparently holds regular concert. At first, I wondered why an inn would have a studio, but it made sense given the musical events. Maya had mentioned that if I visited the studio, I'd understand the reason for my uneasiness. I guess I had to check it out. So, after enjoying the hot springs, I headed to the studio. And the sight I was met with was Maya in a dress, playing the guitar. Seeing her brought back a particular memory. Back when Alice was still with us, we often went to amusement parks for our dates. Camping was a bit expensive for us, so we usually opted for movies or parks. On one such day, "Look over there, they're holding some event." There was a performance on a stage at a small amusement park. A woman stood alone on the vast stage, holding a guitar. But there was hardly anyone watching. It was a weekday, so the low turnout was understandable. Without letting such things bother her, she began singing as she played the guitar. Her voice was incredibly clear and beautiful. As the music flowed, more and more people gathered around. Alice was deeply moved too. "She's amazing. I'd love to hear her play again." I remember her saying that. "Ah, now I get it. The performer that day was Maya." It was a long time ago, so I barely remembered her face, but the sound of her voice and the guitar was unforgettable. The knot in my throat loosened, and as Maya said, I felt a lot better. Her performance was so refreshing that it rejuvenated me. Come to think of it, when we heard Maya's performance back then, Alice and I had just started dating. The sweet and sour memories of those early days came flooding back. Meeting Maya today, here, felt like a gift from Alice. Alice sure had a way of sending surprises from afar. Thanks, Alice. Listening to Maya's song and reminiscing about Alice, strangely, there's no pain in my heart. Maya's song seemed to wash away my pain, allowing me to genuinely touch upon my memories of Alice for the first time in a while. After the performance, there was an opportunity for fans to shake hands with her. She seemed to have a good number of fans, all of them shining with excitement as they met her. As for me, I didn't have the courage to join in on the handshake session, so instead, I left a thank you note in a box for fan letters. It read, "Thanks to you, I remembered so many memories with my wife. But since then, I haven't seen her again. It's only natural, I suppose. She has fans, after all. I'm not someone who can just casually approach her." That's what I thought, and since I was traveling alone and the inn was pretty vast, the odds of bumping into her were slim. I probably won't see her again. Typically, crossing paths with someone by fate is a rare event. Once-in-a-lifetime encounters, you could say. That's the real charm of a journey. But then, surprisingly, never would have imagined meeting you on a blind date. I was shocked too, haha. 2 years later, I ran into Maya. And it was on a blind date. Because she had cut her long hair for her blind date photo, I didn't recognize her at first. By the way, the blind date was pretty much forced upon me by a friend. Rather, I was tricked into coming here. At first, my friend told me, "There's a beautiful woman. She's still young. You should start over," but unfortunately, I wasn't considering remarriage. I vaguely declined when the topic seemed to lean towards a blind date, but then I was invited to a casual get-together. Unlike a formal blind date, there's an easy way out of a social gathering, and I felt bad constantly turning down my friends' invitations. So I thought, just this once, but when I accepted the invite, I was completely set up. He'll pay for this later. But when I found out the other person was Maya, things felt different. With her, I actually wanted to chat a bit. "I thought you're a celebrity, Maya. I assumed you'd have tons of people wanting to date you." "Well, I don't really have that many fans. It's just that my mentor is quite famous, and people come to see me because of their name. Besides, I don't really see myself marrying a fan." It seemed like she was incredibly popular at that concert, but apparently, it just looked that way because I'm not in the know. Filling up that small studio doesn't make one famous. Moreover, Maya's main job isn't singing. She does it as a hobby. With such a beautiful voice, I honestly thought it was a waste she wasn't singing professionally. But according to Maya, it's just a hobby, so I can do it freely and enjoy it without any pressure. Guess there's something to be said about the pressures that come with going professional. Different strokes for different folks. Through these conversations, Maya and I grew closer. Turns out, our connection was destiny. We began dating and, before we knew it, a year had flown by. We clicked in many ways. We rarely fought, and our relationship was smooth. Perhaps our compatibility was spot on, or maybe it was all thanks to Alice. I felt as though Alice nudged me towards Maya. I was genuinely keen on pursuing a relationship with Maya. But I did wonder, was I good enough being a divorcee? When I voiced that concern, she firmly told me, "It doesn't matter. I want to be with you, Ethan." Hearing her say that made me really want to be with Maya forever. Of course, I haven't forgotten about Alice. I never could. But if I keep living in the past, I feel like Alice would scold me. She'd probably tell me to pull myself together. So, I decided to move forward. "Will you marry me?" My second marriage proposal in life. I knelt before Maya, presenting a small ring and flowers. She broke into a big smile, joyfully saying, "I'd love to," as she accepted the ring. It felt incredible. I never want to experience that depth of sorrow again. Since Maya knew about Alice and my past, we get regular checkups together. Early detection increases the chances of a cure after all. And we didn't have a wedding ceremony. It was Maya's wish. "Your wedding with Alice is a precious memory. I wouldn't want to overwrite that." She was so considerate. However, every girl dreams of a wedding ceremony. So, as a small gesture, I surprised her with a photo shoot in wedding attire. She was absolutely thrilled, saying, "This will be a memory to cherish forever." Seeing Maya in that dress with a radiant smile, she looked truly happy. Just watching her filled my heart. "Hey Alice, if I told you I got remarried, would you be mad at me?" "No, knowing you, if I ever made Maya cry, you'd probably haunt my dreams scolding. Don't make your wife cry." The bond between Maya and me, somehow connected by Alice. I'll cherish this bond forever. So, everything's fine now. Sorry for causing so much worry. Thanks to Alice, I managed to move on. I intend to do for Maya all that I couldn't for Alice. That, I believe, would be my way of repaying both Maya for coming into my life, and Alice